in this period between Easter and Pentecost, the gift of the Holy Spirit, which is really the big birthday of the church, we have a series of stories from the Bible being read to us about people coming, meeting the disciples, meeting the apostles. It's the beginning of the thing that we now call the church that's going on. And we read about it and we hear about it. But I often trip over the thought that though we've translated the scriptures into a very modern English, and you think you're reading something that could have been written really very recently, the culture of Israel at the time that this was going on is very far from us. It's almost more like the culture in the tribal areas of Afghanistan than it is like life in North Toronto. So there's a certain amount of biblical archaeology that sometimes you need to do to get into these scriptures. And I was thinking about doing biblical archaeology, and then I thought, it's the long weekend. That would be cruel to you. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to turn and look at us here and what it's like when people are doing the same thing now, of moving towards the church and having a bit of a look at it. And I want to invite you to think about your own experiences of the church. I think most of us probably came into the church because we were born to families that went to church, and we got baptized as small little wet things, and we just grew up in the culture of the church. Or even if you didn't go to church, your family didn't go to church, you probably grew up in a community where churches were normal, where they were around, and they were like fire halls or police stations or grocery stores. They were just there, and they were basically friendly organizations. And the clergy would turn up in England, the clergy used to turn up in school and do assemblies and tell us stuff, none of which I can actually remember. But today, more and more, the kind of Anglo-Saxon Canadian, those people that trundled over the Atlantic from Britain carrying tea bags and bottles of tomato sauce, that group is less and less going to church. I've got 3 kids, all of whom regard going to church as a form of mild and fairly benign mental illness. And Canada is no longer wall-to-wall Anglo-Saxon. There are people from all over the world, many of whom do not have a culture of trundling along to the local Anglican church. So I think there's the question I want to ask is, if you think about this church, Church of Transfiguration, if somebody were to wander in and would say, what would I get out of coming to this church? What would it do for me? How would it help me? What would happen to me if I started coming to this church? And I'm not sure that I have an immediately really good, clear answer. And it makes me think of my first trip into a computer store, which was actually not really quite as long ago as I would like to claim it was. It was about 10 years ago. And I was just realizing that papers and pencils and books were not cutting it for me. And we'd bought a large encyclopedic dictionary thing, and it was almost as soon as it went to print, it was out of date and it didn't self-correct. And I had a friend with a computer who said, you should get one of these. So I went into the computer store, and honestly, it was a terrifying event. It was in the basement of a basement store in a large shopping mall. And I went in, and it didn't look like a shop I'd ever been in before, and it had lots of pieces of equipment in it. And this bright young man came up to me and said, "Can I help you, sir?" And I said, "Yes, I'm considering that I might possibly need a computer of some sort." And he said, "Well, sir, let me show you our computer. Would you like a tabletop or a laptop?" And I thought, my table's actually quite complete. It has a top on, nothing falls through. And my seems to be in good order. So I said, well, what's the difference? And he said, well, one sits on a table and the other sits on your lap. Of course, I said, I knew that, yes. And then I said, what are the difference between your computers? Because some of them are very big and some of them were quite small. And he said, well, this model here, this table, this desktop model, it has a hard drive and a soft drive. Tell me about the hard drive. I said, well, it has 80 gigaflugels, and it's a lot. I said, what about the soft drive? Oh, 47 megaflugels. I said, is that good? Well, it's really the computing speed that matters. It's because this one goes at 280,000 gigaflugels, and that one goes at 374,000 gigaflugels. Which is very fast. I said, what does that mean? Imagining this thing running like a captive rabbit around the top of my desk. And he said, it's how quickly it opens a page. I was thinking, I don't see any pages. Well, the conversation went on like this with me getting more and more mystified. And I left the store thinking, I'm going to have to consult my children on this, because this is just way out of my depth. And I think in a way, when you step into a church, it's a bit like that. You walk in, and you don't know what's happening. You don't know what's going to happen, and you don't know what's happening. And particularly in an Anglican church where we have spiritual aerobics, where you're standing up one minute, you're sitting, the next minute you're kneeling, you're up again, and then you walk to the front, and you walk back again, and you're up and down. And why do we do this? And why do we sit in these weird chairs? And why does somebody wearing, apparently normal man standing at the front wearing a long white dress, what is going on? And it's tricky. So as I was trying to think through this, I thought about something I have done, which is to consider yoga. And some of you may have considered yoga, and so you go along to a yoga studio, and you walk into the yoga studio, and you say, I'm thinking about considering yoga. And there's somebody always at the front desk who says, oh, that's wonderful. I think we can help you with that. And you say, well, I've never really done yoga before. I'm not really sure quite what it is. So they say, well, this is a yoga studio. You can come in. We usually operate with classes, and you could just come join in at the back. Just give it a try. Well, what would I get out of doing yoga? Well, if you do some yoga, it'll certainly loosen up some of your joints, and if you've got tight muscles, it might loosen them up as well, and you'll walk out feeling better after an hour's yoga. Okay. Could I come regularly? Well, yes, you could come as often as you like. We have yoga classes in the morning, in the afternoon, and the evening. We have hot yoga, which is really sweaty, and cooler yoga, which is slightly less sweaty. Do you have to join a class? No, you can just drop in, or you can join a class. Well, what would be the advantages of joining a class? Well, you'd be doing it with other people. You might actually, get to know them. You might find some friends here. But if you're doing it in a class, you're doing it regularly, and you will see the improvements to your body, to how flexy you are, and you'll feel better. And then you might ask, if I really took this seriously, is there anything else? And a yoga teacher would probably say, well, you'll probably find that you're calmer, that you're more focused, and that you're a little bit more peaceful, and you're better at paying attention in life. And if you really want to take it much further, there's a kind of a spirituality about yoga. And there's a way of seeing the world and seeing yourself in it. But that's if you really want to go all the way through. Now, I can understand that. And what I would love would be to be able to say something like that about coming to church. When I went to church first, my parents didn't go to church. And I was about 13, and I thought, I'd like to go to church. I can't really remember why I thought I'd like to go to church. I think it was about 13 or 14, people were getting confirmed. And I thought, well, I should probably do that. Why I thought I should do that, I don't know. And I was on my way home from school, and I walked past the local parish church, went in, and there was a priest. How infrequently are priests available in churches at 4 o'clock in the afternoon? I don't know. And he said, we're having a confirmation class starting in 10 days' time. Again, an astonishing thing, because mostly you'd walk into the church and it would be open, and there'd be nobody there. And then 10 years later, you'd walk to the church and it'd be locked because people were stealing the candlesticks. But I found this nice young priest, and they were starting a confirmation class, and I got in with this group of friends. And there was a youth group, and we used to go off and do walks in the countryside. The church had a little minivan, and we all piled in. And it was a community. And I was welcomed just for being me. And that was really important. I wasn't welcomed as somebody's kid. I wasn't welcomed as a member of grade so-and-so at school. Nobody in the church knew me in any other context other than being there. And I was welcomed as me. And slowly over the years, I was invited. Somebody said, would you like to be a server? And I said, I have no idea. Does it take a lot of time? Think if it takes a lot of time, I'm not doing it. If it's hard, I'm not doing it. Because even back in my early teens, I was basically indolent and uncooperative. But they said, no, just give it a shot. So I got to wear, the kit, like these two up here, and walk around in right angles and never cut corners. And it was kind of fun and weird. And all the way as this was happening, I was learning how to worship, learning what it was to be in a community of people that were coming to do something. And I'd have a hard time describing exactly what it was and why worship mattered and why I got a deepening sense of the presence of God. But I did, and it was important to me. And it launched me unexpectedly into this life of being a priest, but I'd actually wanted to be a physicist. So there were a few sharp left turns. That was what I got. And I think I try to imagine what it would be like for me if I walked into a church for the first time, if I could somehow be deprogrammed as an Anglican priest, which would be an interesting experiment. But when I'm on vacation, sometimes if there's a church nearby, and we often go camping, if there's a church nearby, I might walk in, and I'm always very anxious about going into a big organizational thing where everybody knows everybody else and I don't. So I tend to hang back. And what I would really need is I'd need somebody at the back who would spot me as a stranger and would say, you're a stranger, which would not be a surprise to me because I already know that. But just to be honest, I've never seen you before. You're a stranger. Let me sit with you this morning. Okay, one person. I'd like somebody who'd sit me somewhere towards the back, preferably about 6 feet from anybody else, a nice little quiet zone. And just show me the books, help me find the page numbers, and occasionally when we all stood up, I'd be able to say, why are we standing up? He said, we're standing up for the gospel. Why are we standing up for the gospel? Can't you hear it down here? And he said, well, it's because it's important, because it's like having Jesus here, we stand up. And just walk me through and help me understand the movements and give me permission to join in or permission not to. I think I'd need something like that, and I'd need a person who I could say to, if I come here often, what will it do for me? What will I get out of it? How will I be changed? If I come here, will I have to join some group? Or are there some groups that I could join, that I'd be interested in? I'd like to be able to ask that person the same kind of questions that I could ask a yoga instructor and get answers that would be meaningful to me. Will this help me, at the end of the day, be a better person, a better spouse, a better parent, a better neighbor? Will I be able to contribute something to the good that this organization does? Will I be helpful? And will I learn about myself, about this community, and perhaps about this thing, this God thing that you talk about. That's what I'd like to know. So this sermon that I'm giving you this morning doesn't wrap up with a nice conclusion. What it wraps up with is a request. This church has hung on in bad times and has a vibrancy, even though 2/3 of the congregation are presently sitting inside a cottage watching the rain, wishing they were outside. Ha ha ha. Sorry, that was malicious, wasn't it? That's not in the script. It's a moment of evil got hold of me. I would love you to send me an email or a letter and say, what I get out of the church is this, and this. And when I first came to this church, the things that helped me were that and the other. And I have been to other churches which I fled from. I remember I went to a church once, and I was walking, and I thought it was a service, and they said, oh, we start with a meal. The introvert in me screamed in terror, and I fled. Never set foot in that building again. What worked for you, what didn't? I would love to hear from you. I'd love to have a coffee with anybody who wants to talk about it. And my email address and telephone number are in that spiffy bulletin that you've got. I would love to hear from you. What got you into the church? How did you come here? Why did you come here? What has it really given you? What's the value that you take from this organization that changes your life? And how can we turn that into a sort of a narrative that we could reply to a stranger walking in saying, why should I come here? What will it do for me? What can I get? What can I give? With the same kind of clarity that you might get from a yoga teacher. So the back end of the sermon is now in your hands. I invite you to think about it, and please get back to me. Because if this church has something of value, something which is life-enhancing and worth having, then if we're going to be able to share that with other people, which we think is worthwhile for their own good, not for the good of us, but for their own good, it would be great to have a clearer articulation of it than I presently could put down crisply. So I'd appreciate your help. Thank you.